Sighing at Jacob, Charlie shook his head helplessly. This old master, indeed, has never seen anything in the world. Playing antiques can only afford fakes, and drinking tea is the same. This is mainly because his status in the Wilson family is too low. He was not valued by the old lady before. Later, he was squeezed by Elaine for many years. Life has been unsatisfactory and there is no improvement in money. But fortunately, Jacob's personality is not bad. If he changed to another person, he would have been depressed because he couldn't think about it. Here, while Charlie's family was happily tasting the finest tea, Horia was preparing lunch for the family in Villa A04 next door. Because the child who she was previously pregnant with the black coal kiln supervisor, infected No's whole body, Horia was always excluded from this family. But because Ragnar supported her, the Wilson family did not dare to do anything to her. In the beginning, Horia also pleased the Mrs. Wilson and Noah in various ways, hoping to exchange their forgiveness, and even specially made an abalone dinner for Noah, and bought expensive king crabs to supplement his body. Although kind, she did a bad thing, but it was really meant to please. However, Horia saw that she always had a hot face with her cold boo.tt0cks, so now she has some broken jars. Recently, after the Wilson Group received Regnar's investment, the business restarted. With Regnar's help, it finally returned to formality, so the Wilson family all returned to work in the group's office. Mrs. Wilson is still the old lady in power, Noah is the general manager, Harold is the business director, and Wendy is the management director. This family of four goes to and from get off work together every day, so they are even more alienated from Horia. Her current role at home has almost become the servant for the four of them, doing laundry and cooking at home every day. At this moment, she had just prepared the meal, but before the Wilson family came back, she took off her apron and sat on the sofa tiredly and played with her mobile phone. Randomly swiping the circle of friends, and immediately reached the one of Elaine. When she saw Elaine showing off a bunch of Hermes in the circle of friends, Horia was very depressed. This Elaine is really a stinky burning bag. Isn't it just a few Hermes? Is there anything to show off? After a few curses, Horia felt uncomfortable again. Elaine kind of bitch. There's a son-in-law like Charlie to support her, what about me? What do I have? Husband? Beats me, scolds me, and threatens to divorce me. If it weren't for Mr. Ragnar, this old tortoise would have driven me out. Dead old lady? Not a good thing. This old thing is so bad, if Ragnar hadn't warned her enough, I am afraid that she would beat me to death together. Hey, my son is not up for it. He doesn't have the ability to shit, and he will brag all the time. Such kind of stuff will definitely have nothing to do in the future, and I can't count on him. Wendy, hey, it would be great if Wendy was still with Gerald. No matter what, she can continue to be Fredman's lover. As a result, she has a reputation now. Whether to marry or not to go out is a problem, and it is even more a commodity that cannot be expected. Hey, what can I expect in my life? Who can buy me a Hermes bag? Thinking of this, Horia felt uncomfortable, and when she thought of the hardships and experiences she had experienced, tears burst into her eyes. At this time, the door was pushed open. Noah walked in first with the old lady. Harold and Wendy followed behind. The old lady was wearing a noble mink coat, her face was red, and her face was indescribably happy. Since regaining a new life in the Wilson family group, the Mrs. Wilson has been happy every day, her whole face is red, like she has eaten a rejuvenation pill. As soon as she entered the house, Mrs. Wilson opened her mouth and said, "Oh, although the Wu family is not good enough, at least the lean camel is bigger than the horse. With the project they gave, we can make at least 20 million in profit in the next year. That is really good." Noah laughed and said, "Mom, it's not that you are far-sighted. If you weren't strategizing behind the back, our Wilson group wouldn't have a chance to be born again." Mrs. Wilson nodded in satisfaction. She has always been narcissistic and has a strong desire for power. She likes to be flattered most. Horia on the sofa was very upset when she heard this, she couldn't help cursing inwardly. The old dead woman is really shameless. What is your contribution to the rebirth of the Wilson family? Isn't it the help of Mr. Ragnar? Besides, Mr. Regnar back then but first sent someone to the black coal kiln to rescue me. Only then did you get your family out of the detention center." Mrs. Wilson entered the living room happily, and when she saw Horia sitting on the sofa playing with her mobile phone, she immediately shouted annoyed, "Horia, what are you doing on the sofa instead of cooking in the kitchen? This is your sitting place?" Horia stood up and said angrily, "Mom, what do you mean by this? I am also a member of this family. Am I not even qualified to sit on a sofa?" Mrs. Wilson said sharply, "You are right. You are not qualified to sit on the sofa. In this house, you are a servant. Still a servant who dissatisfied me. If it weren't for Mr. Regnar to cover you behind, I would just drive you out, you pugnacious girl. You." Horia said angrily, "The dead old lady, you're endless, right? You take that little mess out all day long and nag, is it interesting? Don't forget what Wu always does. That said, let us put aside all our prejudices. If you have an old attitude, I will go to Mr. Regnar to help me out." The Mrs. Wilson was speechless.